and welcome to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. Join us for interviews, updates and chat with artists, influencers and those that manufacture the gear that we love. Hello and welcome to 9 to 42, which is the podcast from the guys at the Guitar Show UK. My good friend Jace Hunt is on screen, though it's looking a bit dim in your room, Jace. Are you conserving energy? Is this to keep your bills down?
No, it's because I've got those stupid, trendy, useless light bulbs. You know, the ones that look like vintage, but they're not really.
Ah, yes. Yeah, I know exactly what you mean. With the thing.
Yeah, the filament.
The filament thing in them.
Filament thingy in them, and yes, they don't chuck out any light whatsoever.
They're a bit shit, aren't they?
Yeah,
yeah,
but they look good.
Yeah, that's you all over, isn't it?
A bit shit, but looks good.
Just a little bit shallow. All about the exterior.
Absolutely.
Ah, excellent. I think it's going to be a good night tonight. We've got Mike Long with us, and Mike Long is known to us at the Guitar Show because he's the owner of ATB Guitars. But we've just been touching on the fact he's got a fantastic backstory as well, which I'm sure we're going to delve into, particularly, and I'm going to drop it in early because it potentially involves Marillion. Mike, how are you?
I'm very well, thank you, Ant. Yes, brilliant.
And we've known each other, I'd say getting on 5 minutes now, haven't we?
Indeed we have, yes.
And already formed a common kind of bond.
It's already felt like 5 years.
Yes, bless you for that. Bless you for that. You're very, very kind. Before we start, are you having a good day?
Yes, not bad, thank you very much, yeah.
What's a typical Mike Long day look like?
Oh, gosh. Well, I like to go and work early. I'm quite an early riser. I drive into work, which should take me 10 minutes because of the traffic works. Takes me about 35 minutes in Cheltenham. And I have a cup of coffee, surrounded by over 100 valuable vintage guitars. Sit on the sofa and stare at them and wondering what the hell I'm doing. But then my staff sort of gradually come in about 9 o'clock, and we sort of plan the day. And I've got David, who does. He's the general manager. He works on the guitars as well in the workshop. He helps answer some of the queries. David, he does all the content for us, the YouTube videos. He edits those, and he does all the social media. And he photographs the guitars, helps with the website. And me, I basically, I go on the hunt. I go on safaris. I look for guitars. I try and find them. When I find them, I will write descriptions for them and sell them, answer inquiries. And hopefully if it leads to a sale, then they'll get shipped off to any corner of the world to hopefully happy customers.
And is that a dark art? What you've just tossed in something there. If I go on safari, as if it was the most normal thing in the world, but that sounds like a real dark art to me.
It is in some respects, and it is very much like a safari. I think Joe Bonamassa first coined the phrase. Well, that's the first time I'd heard it, but it's very much like a safari. You stalk your prey, which can, I know that evokes very sort of sometimes not very pleasant things, but it's really getting a sniff of something, getting a sniff of your prey, be it the vintage guitar, and then finding out a bit more information about it, finding out about who the seller is, where he's located. And then basically, I guess you have to stalk it. You have to get in touch with the seller. You have to find out what he's got. You have to find out his circumstances, etc. And then you may go on the hunt. You may sort of fly over to somewhere where he's located, have a look at it, do negotiations, hand over the money, and eventually you come back with it, usually feeling fairly pleased. So yes, it is like a hunt, like a safari, and your trophy at the end of the day is hopefully a very nice vintage and desirable guitar.
Is that the normal kind of places that I would expect you to go hunting?
Oh, I mean, I will go hunting everywhere and anywhere.
Right.
I have been to loads of places in the world, but lately, because of the sad state of the UK pound, I've not travelled so much. It's made it a lot more difficult. So it's generally centred around the UK at the moment. But yeah, I mean, before the pan collapsed, I was travelling all over the place to America, Japan, Far East, Australia.
Okay, I didn't quite meant. I kind of meant a step before that as to where you actually get these leads from. Are you going in the same sort of places we're going? Are you going to eBay? Are you going to places like that? Or is there a different way of you locating these things? Or do people contact you?
I see. No. I don't generally do that these days. No, I used to, but it's so competitive these days, and it's also it's full of quite dodgy people. So no, I tend to. Guitars tend to find me to a certain extent. People tend to contact me. We've sort of built up a reasonable reputation. So if somebody has something to sell, I usually get to hear of it either through word of mouth, through colleagues or friends, or they will come to me direct. They'll email the company or they'll give us a call or whatever, and generally they come over to me. I don't generally chase on eBay or Reverb these days or any of the places like that. I find it not as rewarding as it was 10 years ago plus.
So you had to be early to that platform to really get anything out of it?
Yes, you did. I mean, I was doing that back in the late 90s. When the internet was barely born and eBay UK hardly existed. In the late 90s, I was going around the world looking for guitars on eBay, finding some cracking deals and going over there, picking them up. But these days, it's a lot more difficult to do that. And it's a lot more dodgy than it was then.
Yeah. No, I can believe that because I mean I know not a totally different end of the spectrum to what you'll be looking at, but I remember, I bought a great Squire off eBay probably, 15 years ago maybe or whatever it was, and it was really nice, and you just don't seem to see anything like that anymore, and it was very cost effective. And it was, I ended up driving an hour to buy something that was like 150 quid and was absolutely great. And yeah, that just doesn't seem to exist really anymore. So I suppose you're just doing the same thing, just at a totally different price point, I guess.
Yeah, but no, the analogy is quite correct. It's just so much more difficult than it used to be.
So, when you go off around the world, and let's assume that you've gone to the States in the past and you're not flying you might be flying to the States for a single guitar if it's a particularly special one, but I would assume that, if you're going to go to the States, you're probably going to be looking, I don't know, at picking up maybe 10 guitars, something like that, if you can, or you could back then, before the pound collapsed and everything.
Yeah.
What's the logistics of getting them back? I mean, one you can carry onto a plane, maybe two, but when you've got 10, how are you having to then go to DHL, UPS or whatever, pallet them up? Is that it? Or
I've never actually done it that way, but I know colleagues of mine in Europe, other dealers do it that way. But there's various ways you can do it. If you're carrying, you can carry. I've carried 4 guitars maximum by myself on the plane. Right. At the time, I was flying business class, so I had extra allowance. And 2 of the guitars were sort of like juniors in soft cases, so it wasn't too bad. But I think 4 is the maximum I managed to carry on a plane. But you can easily carry 2 if you travel light. Anymore, there's a couple of ways you can do it. There's, depending on your budget. If your budget is quite slim, you can actually go down to the US Post Office. You can package them up. You can go to a guitar store over there. Find a friendly guitar store who will give you a box. You can package it up yourself, take it down to the US Postal Service, and for what was at the time about $100, you can get it sent to the UK. But this was a long time since I've done this now, so it may well have gone up a lot since then. You can also go DHL, UPS, FedEx, but they're generally very expensive if you're just sending single items. There's freight companies, DHL being one of them, who will come and palletize it for you. and send it back on the plane. That is reasonably cost effective, so I've heard, but I've never done that myself. What we used to do is we had a freight forwarder in Texas who we'd get the stuff shipped to locally, and when he had enough items to make a shipment worthwhile to the UK, then he'd send it over on the pallet in bulk.
Ah,
that makes more sense.
But if you intend to do it yourself, if it's just 1, 2, or even 3 or 4, you could go over and just carry them. That would be my advice. Any more than, look at going down to the post office and send them over. The only thing is, the post office isn't a fantastic system. It's not as accurate in tracking facilities as somewhere like UPS or FedEx. So,
I know. I've bought lots of stuff that's come via USPS. Just as we went into lockdown, I'd bought a what was it called? It's a radial tone bone, so I could play both of my amps at the same time. And it took about 6 months for a guitar pedal to arrive via USPS. It was ridiculous.
It's crazy. You buy it on a wing and a prayer when you do it. It looked like that in some ways. I mean, I bought a switch knob for a 52 Telecaster 2 months ago, and that hasn't arrived yet.
Wow.
I wish you told me, Jace. I think I might have a tone bone here.
Oh, well. I've got it now. It doesn't matter.
Didn't crop up in conversation, did it? I'm now getting very worried, because you and I are going over to the States together next year, aren't we?
We are.
And I'm now concerned that you're going to be handing me 2 guitars as we work our way through LAX.
I mean, in Mike's world, it's probably not that cost effective, but going to the Cosa Mesa guitar show when NAMM's on is just a dream. I mean, you just see all of these really, really cool vintage guitars, plus a lot of sort of like what I suppose are now vintage 80s guitars sort of thing. And the temptation is to purchase one, but the last few times we've had the CITES thing, and it was like, I'm never getting this back with the rosewood board. Fortunately, that's gone now. But yes, the temptation's there. You'll have to come to the Cosa Mesa show if it's on at the next NAMM show. It's brilliant.
Oh, it will be, yeah. If a NAMM's in January, then the show will be on.
No, it's in April.
It's in April next year.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, back to January. I think it's back to January the year after, isn't it?
Yes, well, I believe you're right, yeah.
I mean, that ties in probably because Joe Bonamassa, for the last couple of shows that I'd been to, which would now be 2020 and 2019, I think, Joe Bonamassa has a stand there with his Nerdville guitars. And, 1 year he bought all of his Gibson sort of ESs along, and another year he bought all of his Fenders and stuff. And, I mean, you can't buy them off Joe, but he does like to show them off. And that, it was bloody lovely to look at. Yeah,
yeah, they are. Yeah. I was there that year as well. Actually, yeah, we had all his surf green Fenders.
Yeah, all of it, of course, all of my surf green Fenders. So I suppose that kind of ties in really, because one of the things I got written down to you was to talk to you about the story of the Burst, which got in all of the press this year. I think I put my email to you a 59, but it wasn't a 59, was it? It was a 60.
Yes, a very early 60, yeah.
So, what happens when someone phones you up and says, I've got this knackered old Les Paul, do you want to have a look at it? I mean, how did that go?
Well, she contacted us by email and said that I've got this guitar which I need a valuation for, basically, because her dad was moving house. He'd given it to her to look after. And she needed to increase her household insurance, but she wasn't sure by how much. She said she'd done a Google search on Gibson Les Paul and came up with values of around £5,000. But she said she wanted to take it to someone just to check over, make sure it was right, the valuation. So I said, yeah, we can do that. I mean, I can probably do it by photographs. So just send me photographs. So she sent some photographs, and they were pretty crap, actually. They were taken at a really weird angle, in very poor light, very blurred, which you think would be almost impossible this day with modern camera phones, but I don't know what phone she was using, but it was terrible. Anyway, I from the photos, I couldn't really see it clearly at all. Excuse my cat, Aston. He always likes to be in the picture. I couldn't see from the pictures exactly what it is. In fact, it looks so bad, such in bad condition, and it looked the fingerboard, for instance, looked white. It is so dried out. It was unrecognizable as a rosewood. So I thought originally it may have been a Dick Knight copy because it looked very, very bad. And I know Dick Knight did quite a few copies, and it sort of looked a bit like that. And so I said, look, to be on the safe side, you really need to bring it in here because I can't tell for sure from your photographs exactly what it is. So she made an appointment, and about 3 weeks later, she came in with this brown Lifton case. And I thought, things are looking a bit interesting now. And when I opened up the case, things definitely started to look interesting. And I knew pretty much immediately what she had there. But we did our due diligence. We had a good look at it. We had a good look inside. We looked at all the parts, and we took it to bits. And at the end of the inspection, I said to her, look, I've got some good news. I've got some bad news, I'm afraid. The bad news is it's probably one of the worst, filthiest guitars I've ever seen. The bridge has broken off. The pickups don't work. The frets are completely shot. And it's totally unplayable and doesn't even work. But the good news is it can be fixed. And when it's fixed, it's probably going to be worth in the region of £175,000. So that took her a bit by surprise, to say the least. There was a bit of stunned silence, and then she said, "Oh, I better tell my dad, I suppose." And so she went away to absorb all that. She contacted her dad. Her dad thought she was pulling her leg, didn't believe her. She thought she was having a laugh. And she eventually came back and said, thanks very much for the valuation. What do you suggest we do with it? Well, I suggested that first of all, it needs to be put into playable condition. And then secondly, we'd either make an offer to buy it or we'd sell it on consignment. So she took a good while to think about what she wanted to do. And she eventually came back. We made an agreement to sell it, and she was very happy. And her dad, I mean, we got the pretty much the price we were after. And her dad didn't believe a word of this until the money actually hit his account. He still thought right at the moment that his daughter was having him on. So that was quite a nice story, actually. I mean, it was a good story because everyone ended up happy, which is the way deals should go. And it was just so brilliant. You never ever get that in this day and age. Obviously, with the establishment of the internet and all the prolific details there are out there on guitars, to find somebody who really doesn't have a clue what they have is very, very rare. But she was a teacher from Prestbury. Her dad played in a band in Birmingham in the 60s. He bought the guitar for 50 quid after seeing Eric Clapton play one at the Marquee. His band went on to support Cream, actually. And then his band got a record deal, and eventually they gave up. He moved his life on to something different, and the guitar got stuck in a closet, in a very dirty closet, maybe in a garage by the look of it, and just completely forgotten about until it was time for him to move house.
Wow.
Yeah. If you hear of any others like that, then do let me know.
Absolutely, yeah. So how does Joe Bonamassa get to find out about that? Have you got his number, basically?
Yeah, I do have his number, actually, but I didn't call him. He contacted us. He saw a post on Instagram, and he got in touch pretty much straight away. He asked for loads and loads of pictures of the guitar, which we sent him, and he said, "Yeah, I mean, I'm interested. You know, if you can take it to the Albert Hall, I'm playing there next week, and I'll have a good look at it. And obviously, you know, you can see the concert and have a backstage tour and stuff." So we agreed to do that, and he saw the guitar. As soon as he opened the case, he couldn't take his eyes off it. I knew it wasn't going to be a difficult sell, and he shook my hand within sort of seconds and said, "Checks in the post."
Wow.
And a couple of days later it arrived, so that was good.
Amazing.
Yeah.
No, it is, you know, I used to, before I did music shows, so 25 years ago, I did classic car shows, and we just used to call them barn finds. You know, someone had found a, you know, first series Porsche 911 or something in a barn, and it's the same sort of thing, isn't it? They're always covered in like chicken poop and all kinds of stuff, and you've got that. I mean, how many bursts were made in 1960? It's something ridiculous, isn't it? Like 280 of them or something. It's not many, is it?
It's not many. It's a bit more than that, but not very many at all. No.
Incredible. So, and I suppose, and that is one of the one-offs that you probably never expect to get come through the store, really, isn't it?
I don't think that will happen again in my lifetime. No. Unfortunately, I wish it was an every week occurrence, but sadly, it's not. No. What generally happens is we have people contact us all the time saying, "I've got this old guitar, this Fender guitar, which my dad left us, hasn't been used for ages," and they bring it in and it's been refinished. It's had half of its guts replaced with DiMarzio's. It's got brass pick guards on. And we have to tell them bad news, that it's not worth 30 grand that they thought it would be. So they'll just go on the internet, they'll go on to Reverb and eBay and see these guitars up at these astronomical asking prices and expect that theirs will be the same. So it's good to finally actually find somebody and tell them some good news, rather than what we normally, unfortunately, have to do is tell them bad news that their possession isn't worth what they thought it might be.
So how do you get that? You must have an encyclopedic knowledge of, certainly, I would imagine, Fender, Gibson, and probably Martin.
Fender and Gibson up until about 75, yes. Probably not so much Martin. We're not so much of acoustic specialists, but yeah, I do. We do stock some Martins.
I'm just kind of interested in how you go in your sort of like career trajectory, and how you gain all of this knowledge. Because I mean, I've been reading guitar magazines, books for 40 years, and I don't know half of this stuff. And certainly way back when there was so little information available because the internet didn't exist, and there were so few kind of books and stuff. Well, how does your journey start on this road?
Well, I started at a very young age. I started when I was at university. I was buying and selling and trading and playing on a sort of small scale basis, but that's what sort of got me hooked on it. And I worked my way upwards from there, really. And I've handled thousands and thousands of vintage guitars. And it's all very well reading books, but you gain the real experience by handling them, by seeing them, by feeling them, even smelling them, and just studying every little detail of each one you get through, really, and making your own notes. But there's a lot of good resources out there, don't get me wrong, but there's nothing that really beats experience at the end of the day with that sort of stuff.
So you say up to about 1975. Mm-hmm. What is it for you, and having been to your place and played quite a few of those guitars, what is it that you think makes them so special compared to the sort of like modern day equivalents?
It's a complete sensorial package, really. When you're sitting down with a vintage guitar and playing it, all your senses are activated. It's not just your ears with the way it sounds. It's also the way it feels. It's the way it looks. It's the way it smells, as I said before,
Mm.
and it's an overall package which is not really easily quantifiable uh, in any sort of um, respects. It's just like a complete package, which you don't get with modern guitars at all. Um, most most of the modern guitars, to be honest, leave me quite cold. They, they lack something which vintage guitars often, always, pretty much always do have, and I guess a lot of people would say that's character or soul or whatever you want to call it. But it's again, it's something which you can't easily quantify. But it's a feeling you get when you're holding, playing, listening to a vintage guitar. When you put that down, you pick up a modern guitar. You're left with a much colder feeling about it, and it just doesn't feel the same at all.
Is that to do with the finish, or
It's to do with quite a lot of things. Yeah, I mean the finish certainly does have a lot to do with it. Yeah, there's even the modern Fender Custom Shop nitro finishes. They're not the same as a 50-year-old nitro finish, which has been checked and played for 50 years. Finish has got a lot to do with it. The the way the plastics have aged as well, the looks of it are totally different. It's still very, very difficult to get that right, I think. And you would only get that right if you actually had a vintage instrument with you, because it's very difficult to artificially age something correctly, in my opinion. There are people out there who do it well. I mean, Clive Brown, for instance, does a brilliant job on aging stuff. But you can still tell that it's a new finish which has been aged rather than an original old one. But yeah, a lot of it is down to the finish. That's true. Yeah. There's also the materials as well. I mean, there is hot debate on this, but they did say that they used better quality materials 50, 60, even up to 70 years ago. And there is a certain element of truth in that. Certainly in terms of when it comes to Fender, the bodies in the 50s and 60s, pre-65, were definitely lighter, better selected woods than they were later on, which is why we tend to have 75 as our cutoff, because after 75, things began to go downhill for Fender during the CBS takeover, or after the CBS takeover. And for Gibson, it happened a little bit earlier in the early 70s when Norlin took over. Both these companies were bean counters rather than artisans making guitars, or their primary concern was making a profit rather than making good instruments. And the quality was not so desirable for us and not so desirable for our customers.
do you think it's to do with like consumerism, really? That in the 50s and 60s, they weren't having to log endless rainforests down. So you've got older, slower grown wood, and are they moving into like forced growth by the mid 70s or something? So we're getting more densely packed, tighter wood.
That's actually a very good point, and yeah, I think you could be right there. Yeah, we weren't chopping down wood at the rates we were back in the 50s. That's for sure. Yeah, there wasn't so much consumerism, as you rightly point out, but that sort of exploded, didn't it, during the 70s? And yeah, as a result of that, and we were chopping down rainforests as if they were going out of fashion. So yeah, there's a lot to be said for that. That's true.
Can I just jump in with something? Obviously, you've talked there about your cut-off being 75 and slightly earlier for Gibson. Is there anything that's come after that's had a similar sort of that's got a similar sort of description to what you said about the Fenders from that particular age? I'm going on with the Squire thing really, actually, and going, there's a lot of people really like those early Squires, and there's a lot to the point where they have become collectible. Do you find the same thing with a guitar that maybe stems from sort of early mid-80s that you can pick it up now and it has still a kind of vintage, because it's still thick end of 40 years old, or is it very much limited to that 10, 15 year period, 50s, 60s?
Well, the problem is that's where our expertise sort of fades away, really.
Right.
I don't see enough of the 80s guitars to sort of have a sort of valued opinion, I guess, on that. I mean, we've had a couple here, and they've been really nice, actually. It has to be said. But our sort of sample size is really tiny when you compare it to the sort of previous vintage ones. So I guess I'm not as qualified to comment on those. Right. But based on the two or three we've had here, they're certainly really good guitars, yeah.
Because, I mean, it was kind of in line with what you were saying before, which was we know certain ranges or certain points in time there's been, maybe 5 years or 3 or 4 years where when those Squier guitars came out, they were incredible value. Mm-hmm. When they came through, they were well built, good component parts, kind of really probably wouldn't have gone through the modern kind of cost benefit or cost sort of process. Essentially, they were making a great instrument, and then within a couple of years, the brand's established, and the component parts start to go down because the brand itself is selling, if that makes sense. So the first ones get a reputation. Although Squier guitars are great, people love them, and then people start going, "Oh, Squier, fantastic! We'll buy Squier." At which point you've established the brand, and then
the bean counters come in,
and the bean counters kick in.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I mean, it probably repeats itself in history quite a bit. This scenario, I would imagine. So yeah, it wouldn't surprise me at all.
Only because I had an Ibanez, an RG550, which I bought and should never have sold, which probably would have been worth more now than it was when I paid for it. And obviously, those early Ibanezes are very well thought after, far more than the ones that came even 2 or 3 years later.
Sure.
Because again, at that point they're established, and everybody's suddenly wanting them from actually when they first hit.
Indeed, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Obviously, there was a quite deafening thud when you dropped Joe Bonamassa's name in for the first time. So, following giving you the opportunity to create similar thuds, go on then, give us some of the people that you've sold guitars to.
Oh gosh. Well, gosh, we've a lot of them go to a management company, so we don't get to meet them. But I mean, we sell guitars to Coldplay, Pearl Jam, Blur.
Is there anybody who's always on the lookout?
Yes. Oh, yes, definitely. Yeah. But, Paul McCartney's people in his band are contacting us all the time for stuff. They bought quite a bit from us as well. There's, Joe's always on the lookout as well. He's bought a few items, not just the burst. Geddy from Rush. I mean, he's he nearly bought 2 basses, but he's in touch as soon as we have a nice vintage bass usually. I mean, there's a lot of people out there who collect and obviously play and are looking for these things. And they'll generally go for the rarer stuff, which is obviously quite highly priced. But yeah, they're often on the phone or on the email or whatever, however they communicate.
I'm liking to think there's a kind of guitar celebs WhatsApp group where the word goes round that you've got something a bit tasty in. And Geddy will find out because Joe's posted something on this WhatsApp group. I like that idea. It's not true, but it's just in my head. I quite like the idea of it.
Yeah, it's a nice idea. Actually, it could be correct as well. I don't know. I'm not privy to the group if it exists, but there could be something like that. That's for sure.
Because there's obviously a Tory MPs group that today is going around saying they think the MIDI budget's a great idea, or just the idea of maybe a guitar group that does something probably far better.
That's not gonna last well. That quote, Ant.
No, it's not. No. There'll be somebody reviewing this in a year's time going, "Didn't get that Tory. What's that?"
Well, they probably do a better job of running the country than this Tories MP group.
Anybody could do. Your two cats could do a better job of running the country than, assuming it was two that I saw, than what we've currently got. So talk to us a little bit about the other things you've done then, because we got chatting a little bit before we started the call, and you've got a background in tech and recording and engineering.
Yeah, well, I think as I said before, I went to uni, and when I was at uni, I didn't really spend as much time as I should have studying my chosen subject. Instead, I was part of the ENTS committee and met quite a few bands and helped stage shows at Leicester. This was, and when I was there, I met Rick Nelson from Cheap Trick, who's a well-known collector. And for a university gig, he brought along 70 guitars. He had 3 bursts there. He had about 5 Blackguards. He had vintage Strats. He had a Carina Flying V from '58. And they were all in 10 massive great flight cases, which had been shipped over from the States. And he showed me his entire collection. And from then on, I was completely hooked. So I owe a lot to him, actually. And he was very, very kind. He took time to explain each one. None of his guitars I'd ever seen before in Leicester or where I grew up in Barnstaple. But yeah, after that, I did live sound for many years, touring with various bands, mixing front of house. And then after that, I worked in various studios for quite a long time, quite a few years doing that. And then I decided to co-found one of Europe's biggest vintage pro audio companies, selling vintage Neve, SSL, Neumann mics, valve mics, stuff like that. And we did that for a few years. And then at the end of last century, I started doing what was always my first love, vintage guitars, as a more prominent and full-time profession. So I started up from that. And at that time, I was just selling on eBay. I was sticking 57 Strats on eBay for 1p and no reserve. And and they went for a lot of money, actually. Just because you started off with a penny, you had hundreds of watches by the end of it, and people were just frantically bidding right at the last moments. And they went for more than you'd expect. It was a good ploy. Anyway, I did that for many, many years and went through a lot of vintage guitars. Then when eBay put up their fees, I sort of formed my own company, ATB Guitars, and we've been doing that for quite some time now. And we've got a nice little store well, you've been there, Jason, in Cheltenham.
It's everything that you would hope it would be. I came in, there's Mike's there. Mike wasn't there, but you've got a big sort of old wooden desk that sits at one end. Then you've got like a whole wall full of vintage guitars, and then there's a big collection that were on the floor as well. And I sit on this plush leather sofa, and David was on the other leather sofa. And there's underneath all of the hanging guitars, there's like rows of amps, and I think it was 3 Telecasters I played first, and they were plugged into an old Fender amp. And honestly, the one in particular, I don't know if you've sold it yet, the 69 Tele that it got a terrible finish, that someone had ripped stickers off it and just taken
right,
it.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You plugged it was pure Keith Richards. I've never heard a Tele. I've never played a Tele that sounds like that. It just got that. It got that Tele sort of twang, but it got a growl that you just don't get on a modern Fender. It was just, and I really wanted to buy it. And there was a 70 I played as well, which I liked, but not as much as the 69. It was just it was lovely. It was everything like I say, you want when you go to a place like that you go
good.
into a room that's set up for that, really.
Oh,
You know.
thank you. I'm glad you enjoyed it. Yeah.
Yeah, it was great. And I think what was really nice as well, from a guitar show point of view, and this podcast point of view, because we've had Neil on, you've got a selection of Neil Iverson's guitars hanging up alongside the vintage guitars as well.
Yeah.
They do kind of echo, whilst the designs are, what would you say? They're like a homage. They're not copies.
No, definitely not.
Guitars. They have their own thing. Particularly,
Mm-hmm.
is it the Dakota that's a mix between a Les Paul and a Firebird?
Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But they've got that vintagey vibe, I think, that you don't see very often.
Yeah, they sure do.
And it's kind of nice that you kind of, because Neil's not the only person that you have new stuff from it as well. You've got Flatley pedals, you've got Thorpe FX pedals, you've got some other brands as well whose I can't quite remember now, but I was looking at them earlier.
Oh, Dan Drive, Hudson, we do them. Yeah,
that's right, Dan Drive, Hudson, and it was kind of like you got some guitar straps as well. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, air straps, and we got some Heister Camp. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's kind of nice that you've got some new stuff there, but the new stuff definitely fits within the vibe of the old stuff as well.
That's what we're aiming for, yeah. Everything hopefully complements each other, which is what the idea is.
Yeah, it was funny. I was playing some Strats as well. I was playing. You had a hardtail 70s Strat. Can't remember what year it was, and I said, "Oh, I'm quite interested in that stuff." And he went, "Really? No one's ever interested in hardtail." And I was like, no, I don't. I never use a trem at all, ever. It's just like a pain in the ass to set up, and I don't use it. So what's the point? That was really nice. And then, of course, I end up playing a 68 Reefing, which is the only way that I can get into the vintage market, by having something that's basically been butchered, but still sounds like the best Strat I've ever heard in my life.
No, that's a good way of getting into it. Yeah. Get a Reefing. I mean, definitely, you'll have all the sound of an original for less than half the price usually. So it's good entry point. Good way of doing it. And I mean, as I said on our most recent video, actually, the top 10 guitars which have increased in value over the last 10 years, Strats are in this top 10. And even Reefings have gone up over 100% in the last 10 years. So they're still good investments, as well as great and fun guitars to play.
If it's one of the questions I've written down. If you were talking to someone now about investing in vintage guitars, what 3 guitars would you say you think, because we're not going to hold you to this, but you think would go up in value?
Interesting. And it's a question I'm asked quite a lot, actually. I would say there's room for improvement and room for margin on things like the cheaper offset Fenders, the Mustangs, the Music Masters, the Duosonics. I think they could show some potential gains. I think some of the early 70s Gibsons are too cheap at the moment, particularly things like the early 70s Les Paul Specials. They're very good value at the moment, and I think they're underappreciated. So that's 2 of them. What would be the third? I would say Firebirds, actually. I think they're undervalued right now as well. And I think there's potential for them to increase given time as well.
Yeah,
so that would be my pick. Yeah. Gibson Firebirds. Especially the non-reverse ones. They're very good value right now. I mean, you can pick up a 65 Firebird for 5 grand, something like that, which is crazy. Any other Gibson from that era would cost a lot more, and they present extremely good value for money, I think.
I know it's hard to quantify really because of the different years and everything, but what's your number one sort of like selling? Is it Strat, Telly?
Yeah, I'd say at the moment it's Strats. Yeah, pre-CBS Strats are blue chip guitars basically, and I mean I was just looking at it today. A month ago we had a wall full of Strats, pre-CBS Strats. We're pretty much down to like 2 or 3 now. It's crazy how well they sell. But yeah, they're probably our number one seller. I think we probably sell more pre-CBS Strats than anything else right now.
I know when I was there, Daffy said, if you think that late 60s Strat is the best sounding Strat you've ever heard, don't pick up a 50s one. You can't afford it. It will ruin you. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to pick that up because, quite frankly, I don't want to be ruined.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of truth in that. But I mean, the one you got is really nice, and it's a great way to get into that market. So yeah, no, congratulations on it. Yeah, I'm sure Neil will do a brilliant job on it as well.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen it for 3 months or something.
No, you haven't, have you? No.
I'm saying Neil took the paint off because the paint job was awful on it.
Yeah.
And so Neil sent me a photograph of the neck pocket having this week, and he said, "Well, it's Daphne blue now. Underneath that is white. Underneath that is Dakota red. Underneath that is a deeper kind of wine red. Don't know what it is. And underneath that, the body's been stained yellow. So I suspect it may have been a sunburst, but I'll let you know when I've gone through sort of the body."
Oh, right. Oh, gosh. Well, at that period, they were staining bodies, whatever the finish. So if it's got a stained yellow and the next layer of paint is a sort of darker red, it could well have been a candy apple red originally.
Oh, so
possibly.
I said to Neil, as if possible, I'd like to put it back to what its original colour was. So we need to do more investigation, but I don't mind having a Dakota red one if that's what we end up with.
Yeah, it could well have been Dakota as well. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that would have been. That's quite nice actually. It's a nice colour.
And if we can't decide, I'll probably just go for white because that seems to be like everybody likes a white Strat, right?
Indeed, they do. Yeah. Did he find any anomalies underneath, any routes or anything like that?
Yeah, I mean, I knew that at the time. It's been rated for a humbucker.
Yeah,
at the bridge.
Oh, yeah. Did he find anything else?
No.
Oh, that's good. That's good. Yeah.
So, I mean, I won't put a humbucker in it.
Good.
I'll leave it with. I think it was from what I remember, it was an original bridge pickup, but it had been rewound by Monty's, and the middle and the neck were all original. So,
yeah.
Given that Matt does a cracking job, I'll just leave it as is, sort of thing. Now, they must be round the corner from you, are they?
Yeah, they are. They're literally around the corner. Yeah, they're about 5 minutes. Well, less than 5 minutes by car, 15-minute walk.
Oh, wow. Who'd have thought Cheltenham, rock and roll capital of Britain?
I'm still getting over having a vintage guitar and popping it on eBay with no reserve at a penny. I haven't got past that. So the last 15 minutes of conversation, I've kept only because when I've ever used eBay, I always did the same thing. I never did, and I always started off at pretty much zero and never did reserve. But when you're selling something that you want to get 50 quid for, and I used to panic a bit at that. So I have to say, I'm mightily impressed with what it must take to do that.
Well, this was different times. I'm not sure whether that would be a good strategy now.
No, probably not now.
No. But when I was doing it 20 years ago, it certainly worked for me. And I gained a lot of following because of that as well. I was known as a guy for 1p no reserve, and literally everything I had through, whatever the value it was, went for 1p and no reserve. And I don't think I made a loss ever. I may have lost on 2 or 3 items, which were probably cheaper items, but I mean, the big ticket items, sort of 10 grand plus 20 grand guitars, they always went for more than I expected them to go for.
I don't know if there's a better place to finish, Jay, than that. Being known as the 1p no reserve guy. That's a legacy, isn't it? That's a headstone. Without wanting to obviously wish you unwell, that's a headstone.
Yes, well, mind you, that was the situation. It's certainly not now, unfortunately. I don't do that anymore. But yeah, about 20 years ago, I was known as the 1p no reserve man.
That never leaves you. That
No,
just
I guess
never
not.
ever
No.
leaves you.
Yeah.
No.
Wouldn't it be nice if I could do that now? But unfortunately, times are different.
Yes, very.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for your time.
Pleasure, and thanks very much for having me on.
What a fascinating conversation. So, yes, lovely to see you, Mike. And, well, I guess we'll see you at the next show. I'll probably see you at the next show. Though I'm desperate to come to Cheltenham now.
Yeah, you must, yes. I'll stop in and say hello.
Yeah, I definitely will do that now, though I am a little bit concerned because, actually Jason's probably easier to get money out of than me. So, but that doesn't mean it's not dangerous.
Oh, we're good at extracting money from all sorts.
Yes, that's what worries me.
Be warned.
We ought to say a big thanks to our friends at Focusrite before we go.
Thank you, Focusrite, for sponsoring the podcast. Love you.
Lovely people that they are. Lovely people that they've just released a new product. That's made out of recycled material.
Oh,
fantastic for the planet. They're doing great things as far as sustaining the planet. So we must tip our hat to them.
All right. Consider it tipped.
Consider it tipped. Right, I will see you next time. Mike, I'll see you as and when.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you, Jason. Bye.
And...
Thanks for listening to 9 to 42, the podcast from the team at the Guitar Show UK. If you've enjoyed the show, then please remember to hit the subscribe button and share with other like-minded souls. For more information about 9 to 42, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter or Instagram at the Guitar Show UK. This has been an A Short Stories production.